In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful.
Okay, inshallah, we'll go ahead and get started. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulih al-Kareem. Welcome, everyone. This is an ongoing series by Why Islam. It's a dawah training series. My name is Naqib Shifa. I'm a volunteer for Why Islam here in Southern California. Brother Saad is also the director of Why Islam Southern California. So we're really pleased to have you all join us during this dawah training today. We're honored to have Imam Abdullah Jabir as the guest speaker for this series. The topic is atheism and evolution. Just a quick introduction to Imam Abdullah. He served as in many different capacities, both in California and in Georgia. Among the capacities that he served as is the executive director at CARE in Georgia. He's been the resident scholar and Imam at Masjid Omar. He served at Masajid here in Southern California as well. He's been the member and advisor of the advisory committee of CARE Los Angeles, the co-founder of Muslim Youth of Los Angeles, the founder and director of the nonprofit educational organization Tibyan. He's a board member of the Faith Alliance of Metro Atlanta and the Atlanta South Asian Health Alliance. He's been, a very active speaker, and he really engages the youth, and he's a da'i. He's served as speaking in many different capacities on various topics of social justice, voter turnout, civic engagement, combating Islamophobia. So he's very active in dialogue with non-Muslims, and he's done presentations on various topics involving dawah. In 2017, mashallah, he even did the opening prayer at the Democratic National Committee's National Winter Conference. So mashallah, he's very engaged in the American community as a representative of Islam. And so the topic that we asked him to speak about is dawah through the lens, like a dawah training through the lens of atheism and evolution. So inshallah, at the very end, we'll have to open some time for questions, but if you guys would like, you guys can post your questions in the chat box. So Imam Abdullah, will turn it over to you, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyid al-Mursaleen. Wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa tabi'een wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin. I begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, most gracious, most merciful. I ask Allah to accept this gathering of ours, this virtual gathering of ours. May Allah forgive us for our shortcomings. We thank Allah for all of the blessings that He has given us, the blessings that we're aware of, the blessings that we're not aware of. We ask Allah to bless us with every blessing that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked for. We ask Allah to protect us from every haram, every evil that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam sought protection from. It's a blessing to join you all. I was extremely excited when my beloved brother Naqib had asked me to join, and definitely ala ra'si wal ayn, his command is my doing, alhamdulillah. And Brother Saad also, and all of the organizers, may Allah bless all of you, and it is a blessing to be here with all of you, alhamdulillah. That introduction by Brother Naqib was quite lengthy. Allah knows that all titles in this world are arbitrary, except the one that we are known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is ibadullah, servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah enable us beyond every title, arbitrary title that we have, every hat that we wear. The most significant one that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself was described with was Abdullah, or the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is the greatest blessing that we carry. So may Allah enable us to become better ibadullah, better servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With that, again, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, dear brothers and sisters. It is a pleasure to be here, and I'm again thankful to the organizers with ICNA Southern California, the Why Islam Project, Dawah Project. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase them in all of the good that they have done, and all of the good that they are doing, and on all of the good that they will be doing, and may Allah take them from strength to strength. Now, alhamdulillah, one thing that I myself growing up struggled with was, post 9/11, I was in fourth grade. at that time. Today is actually my birthday, so I just turned 30 today, mashallah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just looking back of 30 very, very fast years of life, when I was about 15 years ago, faith or being a Muslim was something that I had to struggle with, figuring out what it meant to be a Muslim, and then going through classes and science classes and social studies classes, and being exposed to the ideas that we are taught, and almost we are programmed to accept, as Noam Chomsky, the erudite scholar, said. He wrote a book called Manufacturing Consent. So we're almost programmed to accept many of the otherwise scientific theories to be very factual, almost creedal points that even dictate the very belief that we hold. So interesting enough, and I'm pretty sure that many of us have gone through this, so it's not something unique. I'm just sharing. Hopefully, it resonates with all of you brothers and sisters, that faith is, according to the Quran and Sunnah, faith is something that you have to accept. It is, one thing to be born a Muslim, but another to accept Islam and actually submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So having said that, what I'll try to do is, by the way, I'm in Atlanta right now, so it's 8:42 right now. So I will hopefully speak for maybe 20 minutes, and then if you all don't mind, I'll step away for 5-7 minutes and offer my maghrib. And in that meantime, I'm hoping Brother Naqib and Brother Saad can maybe take over, and then I will be back, inshallah. So Brother Naqib, Brother Saad, I just wanted to let you know. I should have maybe let you know before. I just wanted
It's okay, inshallah.
So with that, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and share a screen, and let me see if I can do that. And let me know if you all can see that. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, we can see it. We can see it, inshallah.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So the very beginning, this is a very serious topic when we're talking about atheism, and then atheism through the lens of evolution. This is something very serious. It affects all of us. This is something that I personally struggled with in the very beginning to understand, and also understand what our stance is as Muslims. And this is something that impacts many young brothers and sisters throughout the nation, throughout the world. So just to begin, and this is something that Imam Ghazali, the erudite scholar, was very weary of when we're talking about aqidah and creedal matters, because sometimes when we go into the finer points and the nuances, it can at times implant a doubt that you or the listener may not have had to begin with. So to begin with, I want to say, let's start, all of us, just say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Just make your compass, just get it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Focus our attention on Allah, that we're here by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so that we can refine our intention. Right, so intention, I'm here to earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in a brief dua, may Allah make this a means of benefit for me and everyone. That's the intention I'm here with. And I hope all of us have similar intentions, and may Allah accept from all of you. So moving on, the very first thing, is that when we look at the Quran, let me see if this, yes. The Quran asks a very important question. This is a very famous verse that you have heard of, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, is actually asking us, and this is something very particular about the Quran, which is unlike any other book. It is that the Quran has a lot of not only questions, not only statements, factual statements and other statements, but the Quran is the only scripture, divine scripture, that has interrogative sentences, where it actually engages with the reader. And this is one of the many questions that the Quran asks us. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ Then do they not reflect upon the Quran, or are there locks upon their hearts? Now, those who are familiar with Arabic, aqfal is the plural of lock. So this is locks. And what's interesting here is that when the Quran is addressing us, the Quran is letting us know that if the heart is unguarded, what may happen is that we may develop multiple locks that may be preventing the light of the Quran, the light of our deen, the light of divine revelation and the divine teachings of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam to penetrate. So it's important to recognize what those locks are. Sometimes it could be lust. Sometimes it could be an intellectual lock. Sometimes it could be an emotional lock. Somebody went through an abuse, and that abuse can become a lock upon their hearts from allowing the Quran to penetrate, to the Sunnah to come alive within us. So I shared this verse in the hopes that, when we are talking about atheism and we're talking about evolution, we understand that you may be coming onto this discussion with preconceived notions. And the only way to benefit from discussions, and again, no matter where we're coming from, this is a discussion. Hopefully it will bring benefit to myself and you also. But the first step would be to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest. If you're coming in and joining right now and you have a preconceived notion, for example, you're coming in, this is an example, you're like, well, I already know that evolution is true. And, I don't know why Muslims always say it's a theory and just, try to, get rid of it when it's actually a working scientific model that does make great sense. So therefore, Islam must be false. So that's a preconceived notion, right? And that's very important. Whenever we want to find the truth, the thing that prevents us from getting to the truth is because we act like we know it all. It's this arrogance that we may come with. And there is no divine guidance for the one who is arrogant in front of the Creator. So this is what we believe, that in order for us to benefit, we have to be aware of preconceived notions. What locks do you have? What locks do I have on my heart? Another thing is to understand negative sentiments. We may be coming into this with sentiments from past that may be clouding our judgment. And another thing is overwhelming desires. Some I've conversed with individuals, and may Allah have mercy on all of us, who, when they listen to this, they're so eager to prove the other side wrong that they never give a chance to actually understand or at least listen to what Muslims have to say, or those who believe in the oneness of God and in the miraculous creation of Adam have to believe. So moving on, inshallah. So again, please, let's be mindful of preconceived notions, negative sentiments, overwhelming desires. And this is the same thing if you're engaging with someone. This is something to speak to them about. That if we're going to talk about this, let's be on, a level playing ground, and let's talk about this honestly and not with preconceived notions, right? Because with preconceived notions, there's emotions that get involved, and emotions are not a premise for discussion or dialogue, or at least beneficial dialogue. I am going to skip through this, so don't worry about this. This is, a longer presentation. One thing that I do want to talk about is thoughts. One of the common questions that, somebody that you may be speaking to says, I have negative thoughts, or I doubt. Well, thoughts, questions, and doubts are completely, different things. Thoughts, it's an idea or opinion produced by thinking or occurring suddenly in the mind. That's what thoughts, they come. Usually a person may have 50,000 thoughts. An average person will have 50,000 thoughts run through their mind every single day. We don't think about all of them. They're just passing thoughts. We actually think about a few of them. And the few that we choose to focus on actually develop or shape the paradigm of life, meaning they become the lenses. The thoughts that we choose to focus on, they become the lenses Sorry, I don't know if I just went out for a second. Can everybody still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see the screen as well.
Oh, sorry. My screen just went out. So thoughts are just suddenly occurring. We actually think about a few of them that, and that kind of builds the paradigm of our life. Questions, on the other hand, it's a sentence worded or expressed so as to elicit information. So it's you seeking information, right? So thoughts, we're not questionable for as Muslims. Questions, we're also not questionable but in the court of Allah. Doubts, it's a feeling of uncertainty or lack of conviction. Okay, so there may be an element of uncertainty, and then there's also an element of the lack of conviction. So the bottom line is this: I've spoken to, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because sometimes I've run into young Muslim brothers and sisters who have a thought that turns into a question, but then they misinterpret that thought to be a doubt. Remember, a thought is not necessarily a question. So the last two lines, I want you to kind of look at that. A thought is not necessarily a question. A question is not necessarily a doubt. Okay. Now, after that, the important thing to consider is that when we talk about thoughts, Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, he said that thoughts, they're like rain. They're pouring on you no matter what. And the most you can do is you can take an umbrella and protect yourself from the rain, but it'll still get you, the water will still splash you. So meaning you have to be conscious of your thoughts. You have to protect yourself from negative thoughts. And if not, then that thought can creep and become a question, and then it can become a doubt. Thoughts are very important. They're very critical, rather. This is one of the reasons why the Prophet ﷺ would actually read Surah An-Nas and Surah Al-Falaq amongst seeking protection from Allah from many other things. It would also protect him from the whispers of shaitan, right? Because shaitan can exploit our emotions. He's always going to try to exploit our emotions. And again, to remember that Sahaba and others had at times negative thoughts, and that they would come to the Prophet ﷺ and share with him. But then the Prophet would engage them and discuss with them. And sometimes having some sort of questions is actually the sign of Iman, because the Prophet ﷺ was once approached by a group of Sahaba who said, we have these negative thoughts. We would rather fall from the sky and be done away with, rather than to even utter them. That's how despicable or lowly the thoughts are. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, all praises to Allah, who has taken all of the efforts of shaitan, and shaitan trying to beguile you, the shaitan trying to mislead you, and all of his efforts have been turned into just a simple thought, meaning he has failed. So that's what the Prophet ﷺ said, Alhamdulillah, and said, glad tidings, because the fact that shaitan is messing with this individual, messing with us, is a sign that we have Iman by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So moving on, I'm going to just go past this. This is just answering. So as I mentioned, the Quran is a very unique book in the sense that Quran asks us many questions, right? One of the objectives of the Quran is to stimulate the intellect. So Islam is not the Quran does not, Quran does not promote blind conformity and blind following. It asks us very, very, important questions throughout. The Quran also answers many questions. The Sahaba asked questions that the Quran answered throughout. The famous story of Ibrahim alayhi salam asking Allah a question. So these are very, very important aspects of the Quran, because the lesson that we learn in Ibrahim alayhi salam is that when he asked Allah, "Oh Allah, how do you bring the dead back to life?" Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him, "Awalam tu'min, do you not believe?" And he said, "No, I'm asking litatma'inna qalbi, so that I can have a greater sense of security and contentment." So here, as I mentioned here, motivation, seeking further contentment of the heart. To ask questions With that motivation is permissible, because as you know, there are different levels of knowledge, there's different levels of conviction. So he had Iman, he wanted a different level of conviction. When we're talking about and when we're giving da'wah, it's important to engage the individual. And if it's us that's struggling, it's important to engage and know why. What is the motivation behind your question? What is the motivation behind me asking this very question? Not recognizing the motivating factor behind our questions can be a very, very big major problem. Because if it's based on emotion or if it's based on something else, then it will cloud our judgment in accepting the truth or seeing the truth. Another thing is that if it's, if the motivating factor is negative, then shaitan can further exploit us, and that leaves us more vulnerable, and that's something that leads us to doubt. Another suggestion is that don't wait. If we have questions, seek answers as soon as possible, right, from dependable sources. And a note here, the messenger, the companions, the scholars asked questions for further clarity, seeking conviction. This is a note for those who are students of Islamic studies, that you know that many of the earlier scholars, they would actually ask hypothetical questions regarding matters of fiqh, regarding matters of jurisprudence, seeking questions for further clarification. So this is, again, asking questions is something that's actually encouraged in our faith. Another thing is to understand that doubts are not all the same. When the Quran talks about doubts, the Quran talks about shak, for example. Shak is where doubt is due between two matters that seem to have equal strength, right? So the Quran uses the word shak for doubt. The Quran uses the word raib for doubt, a doubt that is accompanied by fear and anxiety. That's a different type of doubt. The Quran uses mirya, for example, where you doubt your position due to a counter argument. So you initially believed your argument, but when there was a counter argument that made you doubt your position. So the reason I share this is to understand that not every doubt has a similar solution. The Quran gives different solutions to different types of doubts. And again, this is part of a longer conversation, but this leads me to the most important part of the introductory comments that I'm making now and sharing with you, is to recognize the pathways of doubt. When we're giving da'wah, it's important to understand where this individual is coming from. Is there doubt, or is there a question, and is it due to intellectual doubts? If it's an intellectual doubt, then you'll need to engage them with intellectual debate or intellectual discourse and dialogue. Intellectual doubt is where evolution comes in. Intellectual doubt is where atheism comes in some way or another, as I will hopefully share with you briefly, that modern day atheism is not the typical atheism that you may understand, or even individuals that we may be talking to may understand it to be. But again, there are pathways of doubt, and again, like I said, not every doubt is the same. They are motivated by different factors. Sometimes it's a person's intellectual rigor that may land them in trouble intellectually and doubt the divine, doubt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there are intellectual doubts. Another pathway of doubt is emotional doubts, that sometimes a person has gone through a low point in life, and that hit them hard. They had loss in their family, loss in business, an accident. May Allah protect and preserve all of us and our families. But then that may create an emotional doubt, right? So that's now, there has to be a very different approach to emotional doubt. So I'll give you an example of emotional. Somebody went through an abuse. They were abused when they were young, and they now take that with them and they grow up. And that abuse then shapes their paradigm of life, and then therefore they may doubt God, or they may not really fully accept God because of that emotional doubt. Social doubts, for example. Well, social doubts are because of we're social animals in the environments that we live in. As Muslims, do we support LGBT, right? Do we stand in solidarity with them? What does it mean to stand in solidarity with them? Do we agree with their lifestyle? So, for example, now some to come fully on board and say, no, we completely agree with them, we this and that. Well, that may be questionable, but at times we may doubt that and say, where do we stand? All right. So that may be a social doubt. Obviously, as Muslims, we respect all life, all form of life. And we, if obviously if somebody's being harassed in public, you're not going to ask them and say, hey, hold on, before I help you, I want to know, are you a homosexual, or are you LGBT, something. You just help. So obviously that's not the point. The point is that the doubt that they have may be due to social issues. Another one is moral doubt, right? If, for example, morally is wearing a hijab, is it morally correct or not, right? Thinking that I'll take the hijab example for now, because of where we live. And again, a doubt can be multifaceted, meaning it could be intellectual and emotional, it could be emotional and social and moral. But these are just separate, distinct pathways, but they can be intersectional, right? Another one is egocentric doubt. Egocentric doubt is something that is very problematic, because egocentric doubt is where a person is so egotistic that it's like, if I don't understand it, it doesn't make sense, right? And this is something that sometimes we fall into, and we're at fault for having ego at times. Excuse me. So that's egocentric doubt. And the last but not least is spiritual doubts. And this, I'll share with you, is something that we suffer from time to time. Sometimes you can give a person the answer that they're looking for, but you can give the answer, but yet you're not convinced, right? And if you look back, you usually see that, especially in da'wah. A da'i, the one who calls towards Allah, may suffer from all of the first five, because they lack in spiritual refinement, right? Sometimes you may not have the answers, but because you're sending salutations upon the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you are actively reading the Quran, you're praying your sunnah, you're building a relationship with Allah. Sometimes you may not know the correct words, we may not know what to say exactly, but because you're spiritually strong, your presence can impact the heart of another person. And this is very important in da'wah, sometimes that we overlook. Sometimes we're so busy watching videos and learning rebuttals that we're not refining ourselves spiritually. And this is very, very important, because not refining ourselves spiritually in the field of da'wah means you and I, we're leaving ourselves vulnerable to the attacks of shaitan. Allah forbid you want to engage with someone in a dialogue intending to give da'wah, but our own spirituality is weak. We now have left ourselves vulnerable in the sense that they can say something and it can actually creep in and create a doubt, a negative thought or sentiment in our faith. So this is very dangerous and very important to keep in mind. Having said that, if it's okay, Brother Naqib, what I'll do is just, maybe you guys can have a brief discussion. I'm going to step away briefly, and after this, I'll go into the history of atheism, and then hopefully shift into evolution briefly, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. Okay, inshallah, no problem. We'll see you in a few minutes, inshallah. Okay, so while Imam Abdullah is breaking for Maghrib, because keep in mind, everyone, he lives in Atlanta, so he's on East Coast time, so he's just taking a 5-minute break for Maghrib. In the meantime, what I wanted to share with everyone, let me see if I can find it. I'm going to pull up a screen share. 1 second. I'm just going to pull up a couple of links here, and then I'll do the screen share. I just want to share with everyone some of the work that we do here with Why Islam Southern California.
Spread the truth. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So for those who are kind of new to the series, this is the ongoing series that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk. So why Islam Southern California has offered this Dawah training series, but specific through different focuses each week. So this lecture has been taking place since April 26th. And it's every Sunday from 5:30 to 6:30. So some of the topics that have been covered before are introduction to Dawah methodology, the fiqh of Dawah, gender issues. Then we had a break for Eid. Then we had introduction to comparative religions, Abrahamic faith, and who is Jesus in Islam, Christian theology. We had that last week, and then this week, June 21st, we're on atheists and evolution. And as you can see, we've had different speakers because we want to get as many da'is perspectives as possible. So these are the speakers are people who have been many years of experience in Dawah, and also scholars like Imams. Next week, we're going to have Dawah to Hindus. Keep in mind, Hinduism is one of the biggest, one of the main world religions. And then the last two are going to be what is Sharia? Because Sharia, there's a lot of misconceptions about it, what we hear in the news, and what misconceptions that non-Muslims have. And then we're going to cap it off with Dawah to African Americans of the Nation of Islam. So that's basically this ongoing series. Now, for those of you guys who have missed some of these lectures, the nice thing is that we do post them onto our YouTube channel. So here is our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and you type in ICNA Southern SC for Southern California, these are the lectures. So we have the Dawah lectures that are posted, and we have more than that. So everyone, we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and access the lectures. So here is last week's lecture. It was by Dr. Ali Atai. He did on Christian theology. So it went for about a little over an hour. So for those of you guys who missed it, please, or even if you attended it and you wanted to go back to it and revisit it, feel free by subscribing to our YouTube channel. So that's there. And then we also have our Facebook page. Everyone's, right now this lecture is being streamed live to our Facebook page, so everyone can access that and view it there as well. So we have both a YouTube channel and Facebook, try to stay active with our social media. And then we also have just to kind of plug in, we are doing a fundraising drive. So if you guys, are able to contribute, we have, this has been going on since the beginning of Ramadan, this fundraising drive. And one second, I just got to share. And so our goal is to raise $10,000. So far, mashallah, tabarakallah, we've raised 8,200, and we have a little bit more to go. And so some of the work that we've been doing, why Islam Southern California has existed since the year 2000, so it's been 20 years now. There's a picture of some of the type of work that we do. We have Dawah booths at various events. Here's our 2019 annual report. We've distributed over 9,200 Dawah brochures, over 2,000 Qur'ans. We have Spanish literature. Southern California has a big Hispanic population. We distribute to them both Qur'ans in Spanish and Spanish brochures. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, over 83 people in 2018 have accepted Islam by the tawfiq of Allah. We also post billboards. I know some of you guys may have seen pictures of the billboards on WhatsApp as they've been circulating, but we've posted over 26 billboards. And we also do Dawah workshops. So just general Dawah 101. A lot of these are colleges, MSAs that invite us. And so we have that too. If there's an MSA or if your local masjid wants a Dawah workshop, please contact us and let us know. We can send our representatives, depending on where you are, we have representatives in the various parts of Southern California to do a Dawah workshop. And then there's plenty of events that we have as well. So there's, book fairs and just general places where there are vendors available. And then we always seek to book a booth and then distribute Islamic literature to the people there. So, this is kind of a little snapshot. I do have a picture of I'm trying to pull up a picture of one of our billboards, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there in terms of some of the work that Why Islam Southern California does. So please feel free to, support us. And one of the things is when it comes to Dawah, sometimes people have hesitations because they're like, I'm not knowledgeable enough, but our intention is to kind of put these resources together where we can develop our knowledge and we can build the confidence to give Dawah. But at the same time, we can also have like that dual paradigm of involving ourselves directly, and then also financially supporting the dawah work that happens. So, Brother Saad, did you want to add a little bit to that? I'm going to try to pull up this other slide of the billboards.
No, alhamdulillah, just please support us. Please put your donation. Alhamdulillah, one important last bit of there is a part 2 series coming along for Dawah Training Part 2 series with better speakers and higher level topics such as emotion versus intellect by Brother Mustafa Hijazi from National, and there's other topics as well. And also there is what you call it, Dawah University being planned out by Wisdom National, which I'm part of the team. So there is a university for Dawah training. 3 months in-person classes are being prepared. So, Jazakallah khair.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, also we are slowly, as the board of YSDAP in California, we are thinking maybe in a week or two, maybe in 3 weeks, we are going to start slowly doing street dawah again.
Street dawah, right? Yeah. So again, for those of you guys who want to get involved in dawah, you have a great opportunity that whenever we do street dawah, you can go with experienced people. You know, sometimes if you just want to observe, you can just come, just observe, and just see, and kind of get your feet wet in dawah. You know, and then kind of build a comfort, and then start to engage. You know, so the nice thing is it's like a team effort. You know, when it comes to just the dawah work that we do. So. So alhamdulillah, we have Imam Abdullah back on. Inshallah, we will turn it back over to him.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sorry if I disturbed anything. Inshallah. I'll go ahead and try to share the screen again, and Bismillah. No. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So just to continue, inshallah, again, I'm very thankful that you all excused me to me offer my Maghrib by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah accept our devotions and our prayers, and may Allah increase us. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. So just a brief, history of what of atheism. The modern atheism that we have today, this is arguably called the New Age atheism. So the atheism of Nietzsche and Kant and others, it's more intellectual. And the modern day atheism, which we call New Age atheism, is led by Dennett and Sam Harris and the Four Horsemen, Dawkins and Cross. And this is more of an emotional mess in many angles, and hopefully I'll touch upon that briefly. But if we look back at what really brought about the atheist revolution, for lack of a better term, what we see is that it's because of the Christianity, the faith, the Vatican's inability to reconcile between scripture and the material world, between the divine and the material world. So with that, very briefly, what is, when we talk about atheism, when we talk about evolution, the biggest clash came about when the scientific revolution happened, when we see that science challenged the Catholic Church, and that led to Christianity itself being questioned. And Martin Luther, who was the lead, that wasn't his intention. His intention was not to question the church, necessarily the Catholic Church. It was more to promote knowledge and science. Now, that brought about a general belief that people realized that the Catholic Church is wrong. People lost confidence in the church, which controlled every aspect of their life. And this led to a skepticism of religion as a whole. So again, I am simplifying this as much as I can, and I apologize for that. But again, it's the inability of the Vatican to now, and again, please keep in mind, this is very Eurocentric. This is very Eurocentric, Anglo-Saxon, very white. And I don't necessarily say that because of everything that's happening right now throughout the nation, and then the problem that plagues us as a nation, but I'm saying it consciously because even when you look at evolution, there is a way that people of dark skin are looked at, and especially people of Africa are looked at. And this is something that Darwin talked about, his son talked about, that they're lesser beings, almost lesser creatures. So keep in mind that this is something that's born out of skepticism or inability of the Vatican to reconcile. And that led to just an open general criticism of religion. That kind of led to what we know as deism, right? Deism is the belief that there is a God with the capital G, but we don't know much more than that fact. So there is God, but we don't know anything more than that fact. Now, deism in itself is a secular idea. Okay, deism in itself is a secular idea, and this is actually the common religion of the 17th and 18th century. Actually, many of our founding fathers, many of the founding fathers of the United States, arguably like Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, were deists. So they believed in a God, but nothing more than that. So that's deism. Now, what's unique about Islam, and this is important to note, is that Islam, historically, Muslim scholars have been at the forefront of science. So many of the sciences that we enjoy in the modern world, we can find the major contributions of Muslims, made by Muslims, in taking from the old, refining and strengthening, and then contributing to the sciences that brought about the European Renaissance. So historically, as Muslims have never seen a conflict between the divine and the material, because our belief is that Allah created the heavens and earth, and Allah gave us the divine book, and He is the creator of he to Him belong the heavens and earth and the book itself, the divine speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't believe that there's contradiction. And this is why Muslims have always been in the forefront, right? So they understood science as science, and they understood revelation as revelation. And whenever there was a question regarding science, we interpreted science through the lens of revelation, because revelation is beyond the human capacity, meaning intellect has limits, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond the limitation that we have. So whenever conflicted between reason and intellect, between intellect and revelation, we give preference to revelation as Muslims. In Islam, again, scientists were never they were not persecuted, right? Unlike in the Christian history, we see that in Christian history, we see that scientists are persecuted, are killed, are crucified. And as Muslims, we don't see that. We don't see scientists being persecuted. Actually, we see scientists being the most respected in society, and something that like Al-Ghazali, Ibn Sina, many others. These are all scholars of the divine and also scholars of the world. And then Muslim scholars never made science the criterion for revelation. Rather, revelation was the criterion for science. Now, having said that, when we look at the 17th and 18th century, we don't necessarily see criticism of religious practices, right? Even in the 18th century, you still cannot publicly ally yourself with criticism of religion or somebody who is criticizing religion, right? So Voltaire, Shelley, Ludwig, others, we see them, they don't necessarily openly criticize, right? And then to understand that the modern day atheism that we have is actually a strand of atheism. I'm going to come back to that. The one thing to understand right now is the slide that's in front of you, and I hope everybody can see that. Let me see if it comes over here. Okay, yeah. So the question is, what is science, right? Science is a tool. Anything that you can, build with some workable model, which betters human life, human condition, usually falls under science. So it is a tool. It provides us workable models. Now, just an disclaimer, I am not a scientist. I don't have degree in any sort of science beyond, basic science that I learned in high school and through college. But beyond that, my specialty is in theology and jurisprudence. So that's where my specialty lies. But through that, I have been exposed to the literature and learning and discussions and dialogues and debates in this realm. So I'm hoping to share some of that with you. One of the most problematic issues is when we're addressing and giving dawah. Most people that want to talk about atheism or evolution, they speak about it from the angle of science, but they have not understood the framework of science or the psychology behind science. So this is problematic, right? So let's understand, what is science? What is the philosophy of science? And that's the correct term, the philosophy of science. What is science? It's a tool. It provides us workable models about certain aspects of the observable world. So again, keywords: a tool, workable models, certain aspects, observable world. So if you look at that, and this is a commonly agreed upon definition of what science is, it's limited. In the very definition in the philosophy of science, science is limited. And again, evolution being a scientific theory, and which is valid in many scientific fronts, is at the end of the day an outcome of a tool, which is a workable model, and it explains certain aspects of existence on Earth, of the observable world. Having said that, that should tell us that science is not meant to encompass every aspect of our life, especially not creedal issues. So what does that mean? So when somebody says, "Do you believe in science?" That's an oxymoron. It's not an intelligent question, because you can't believe in science. Science is not a matter of belief, but it's a matter of workable models, something that you can agree with or disagree with, while it still is respected in its place. So it's not the goal of science to provide truth. That is not what science is there for. The problem one reason or one argument for that is the problem of induction, what they call the black swan problem. And that is, for example, if somebody goes out there and sees, he sees a group of swans, and he said, I believe all swans are white. And then suddenly, the picture shows, for example, there's a black swan. Now that kind of, his hypothesis that, or his judgment or his theory that he built based on the problem of induction, is that he looked at a set of observable data, and he took that certain aspect of the observable data, which he observed, for example, white swan, and then he induced from that all swans are white, right? So this is what usually a person who doesn't accept the philosophy of science falls into. they may take some aspects of certain aspects of the observable world and they may come up with workable models that can be used as a tool to understand further scientific discovery, but then to take that as a fact, as all encompassing, where now it becomes a truth that's supposed to trump anything and everything, well, that's against the very philosophy and the core of science. So again, simply, it is not the goal of science to provide truth. Another thing is the scatter graph problem, meaning same observations can lead to different conclusions, right? And I'll show you a comic to explain that more shortly. But the FYI here is that it is not scientific to talk about God, right? If you look at the definition of science, a tool that provides us workable models about certain aspects of the observable world, that leaves us with the fact that it is not scientific to talk about God. Why? Because the question of God is a creedal matter. It's a theological matter. It's a matter of the immaterial, right? It's a matter of beyond the material. So it's not scientific to use science to disprove God. So this is, I mean, it's meant to be, a comic, but there's a lot of truth behind it. So if you read it with me, if you start from the left, the lady there, she says, "Chow time, Roscoe," and the dog says, "She feeds me every day and cares for my every need. She must be a god." So remember, we're talking about same set of observations, different conclusions. The other one with the cat, it's where you have, she says, "Here is yours, Muffin," and the cat says, "She feeds me every day and cares for my every need. I must be a god." So this is what the scatter graph problem is, right? It's that the fact that two individuals or multiple individuals can observe the same thing in the observable world with, the same means, but can conclude very differently is also a problem. So again, I'm just sharing these two simple examples, and I'll go back. The scatter graph problem and the problem of induction. So these are two basic issues that should bring to light the fact that science and the goal of science is not to discover ultimate truth, but is to come up with workable models. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that you can have scientific theories that may be correct at one time, but then, challenged and challenged at a later time, right? So I'm just going to go through this. Observation, difference between observation and scientific theory. Observation may not change. When it comes to scientific theory, which is a conclusion based on the observation. So observation, for example, when you look at, you had, and this is actually what really started the challenge within the Vatican and others, is the question of, is the Earth the center of the universe or the sun the center of the universe? So you have the same set of observations that haven't changed, but the scientific theories change, the conclusions change. At a time, we thought the Earth was the center, and that was scientifically, taken. And then later on, we see that being challenged, and then we say, no, well, we're not the center. So again, understand that when it comes to science, observations may not change, but the scientific theory, the conclusion of the observations may be very different, very, may change. The example is here. Newtonian physics worked for over 200 years. What is Newtonian physics? We say, well, Newton said time and space were assumed to be fixed according to Newton. They were fixed. After 200 years, we see Einstein came along, introduced his ideas, the theory of relativity, and he not only challenged, but actually changed the very idea that was taken to be science, Newton. And he said, well, no, time and space are not fixed, but they're dynamic as proven by his observations, right? So again, the idea is that when you talk about science and scientific theory, a theory can be correct in its own time, but can later be challenged, refined, bettered, canceled, omitted, And all of that works in science. So again, the purpose of science is not to discover ultimate truth. That is not the philosophy within the philosophy of science. What does that mean? Theories work even when they contradict each other. So for example, relativity, and then we have quantum mechanics. So nowadays we have quantum mechanics, where we are now completely even challenging Einstein, right? So, and that's the idea, that these are theories that are workable models. They're workable models. They're not supposed to lead a person into creedal question and doubt. And I hope most of us are you're picking up where I'm going with this. Today, when you have science, when people say science, and they're arguing for atheism or evolution, it's important to understand that in Dawah, you have to differentiate between science and popular science. Popular science is what most atheists will implore and use, not science itself, because when we say science, we're talking about the philosophy of science. We're keeping in mind the parameters and the limitations of science, and also the objective of science, workable models that explain certain aspects of the observable world that can be challenged, refined, better omitted, etc., so forth and so on. So what is science versus popular science? Well, I guess, I don't know if my slides are out of order, but let me see. Okay, they're not out of order, but I'll try to hopefully glue this together. When it comes to the creation of Adam alayhi salam, which is a central question when you talk about evolution, because if you believe in evolution, do we believe in the creation of Adam? Well, simply put, when evolution is a scientific theory, so the question of belief is not there. You can say it makes sense. I agree, because it's a tool to understand, different aspects of life on Earth. Now, when it comes to the creation of Adam alayhi salam, our belief is that Adam alayhi salam was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah has told us in the Quran, as the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us. And this is because man was honored, the human being was honored as the Khalifa and the vicegerent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth. And also because the life of man is very, very unique, because it has great purpose, right, in recognizing God and then fulfilling the duty of stewardship in being caretakers of this world around us. We're sentient beings, right? Now, if a person accepts evolution and says, no, Adam was created, well, then the Quran would say, am khuliqu min ghayri shay'in am humul khaliqun? Were you created out of nothing, just complete nothingness, or am humul khaliqun, or did you create yourself? So it's either that you were created out of this random, process, or you created yourself. So the Quran asks very simple questions that can be understood by different individuals at different depths and different levels of understanding, whether it's a layman or a scholar, whether it's a scientist or a politician or a neurosurgeon to a farmer. Different people can understand that simple question the Quran asks. Khuliqu min ghayri shay'in, were they created out of nothing? Am humul khaliqun, or did they create themselves? So what's the answer? It's a rhetorical question the Quran asks. If a person accepts evolution, we know that evolution is an unguided, purposeless mechanism of Mother Nature. Then by default, we are nothing but overgrown germs that have arrived here accidentally by mindless process and thus have no ultimate purpose or significance. Now, that would mean we are each objectively worth zero. Life is meaningless, and adding up a bunch of zeros does not create value, right? Now, if we accept that, and look, this is the outcome of evolution, right? Because evolution, as as simply as I can put it, as noted, whether it's and by the way, keep in mind, not every evolutionist is a Darwinist, right? Because there are different different theories of evolution, right? So also keep that in mind. Remember, we're talking about workable models. Although evolution or Darwinism has become has really taken over what we call popular science. But in science, Darwinism is not the only explanation for life on Earth. So going back, if a person accepts evolution, which is an unguided, purposeless mechanism of Mother Nature, the default conclusion would be that life has no ultimate purpose, that we are all objectively worth zero and life would be meaningless. So that paints a very grim picture of the world. Very grim picture of the world. Now I'll stop here and ask you this question. Do we really see the world becoming a better place, or is it becoming more crazier and crazier, where we see more mass shootings than number of days on a calendar, where we see more deaths and more chaos than peace and tranquility? If you see, the Prophet ﷺ said that towards the day of judgment, he said that the day of judgment will not come upon the human until there comes a time where there's not a single soul left to utter La ilaha illallah. And La ilaha illallah is the basis of our creedal belief, our aqidah, our belief, our creed, that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah. One way to look at that hadith and narration of the Prophet ﷺ is that towards the day of judgment, as it draws near, godlessness would prevail. And with godlessness, life loses value. Life loses purpose. So then it's easy, if a person is going through difficulty and they don't have a belief in the divine and in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they don't have a purpose. The easiest way out for them through that pain is suicide. And that's what we see a very high level of suicide within the younger generation, because we're affected by this, and the world becomes very grim, and the only way out and escape would be through suicide. And we also see the world is becoming a very, very unpleasant place, right? And this is why it's so important for Muslims to fulfill our duty and invite people towards the truth, invite people towards the deen. Now, the interesting thing about evolution nowadays, Darwinian evolution we're talking about, is that, let me see. Yes. The Darwinian evolution is that today it has 5 unique characteristics. It's a religion. Darwinian characteristics has influenced politics and legislation, and again, I'm not going to go into details with regard to these individual points, but it has, and Noam Chomsky, for example, has talked about how Darwinian evolution has impacted American legislation, American foreign policy, and how we deal with the rest of the world. It has become an ethical system, right? It has become a tool for mass propaganda. It has become a secular religion and almost a blind faith. So a lot of young brothers and sisters that I have interacted with that claim to be atheists, actually they're not really atheists. They're veiled atheists, in the sense that, or veiled agnostics rather. They're veiled agnostics, that they really, what's the difference between an agnostic and an atheist? Agnostic, if you say, if you prove to them God exists, they will believe in God if you prove to them. And an atheist, no matter what, won't believe, right? That's an atheist. So just to understand, again, hopefully, I know there are other speakers, inshallah, who will be much more qualified. They'll be tackling this in more detail. But just to understand that evolution, or Darwinian evolution, has really become a religion and a force that has impacted in the way of popular science many of our understanding, of evolution. I know we're short on time, so let's see if I can just wrap up in this one, inshallah.
Sheikh Abdullah, you could take a time. Take as much as you want.
Jazakumullah. Jazakumullah. So when we're looking at evolution, we have to look at it for what it is. So evolution, the theory of evolution takes into account observations and tries to explain them in a scientific manner. And that's the purpose of science. You take a set of observations and you explain them in a manner that's scientific, that's understandable, that makes sense based on the observable facts. However, when you look at explanations, when you look at scientific explanations, the explanations of theory of evolution, they are based on assumptions. They're assumptions based on speculation, right? Because many of the whether it's actual fossils or anything else, they're observing, and the assumption that we're coming is based on speculation, based on probabilistic framework, and some biologists, for example, have even challenged it and even scientifically found it problematic, and some have found it disputable. And that's what science is, that it's okay. There are many, but not all biologists are evolutionists, and not every evolutionist is a Darwinist, right? And that's in the field of science. But popular science, as I mentioned, will give the notion that this is the ultimate truth almost, and that there is no place for disagreement or dissent. And evolution has also led to a great evil, in my opinion, that evolution has promoted the idea of a superior race. And this is a tie-in with what's happening in the world when we talk about systemic racism, when we talk about colonization and genocide. It is that evolution, Darwinism, it promotes the idea of a superior race. It promotes the idea of hierarchy, a racial hierarchy that leads to racism, that led to racism, that led to colonization, that led to genocide of the indigenous people in this country. In the Descent of Man, it's written the superior race will prevail all around the world. So this is something that's written in his book, the Descent of Man, by his son Leonard Darwin, who actually, to quote him, said, "What do we do with the savages, with the savage races?" And this is him referring to the African continent, right? So one thing that we see is that it has also led to a great evil, because it promotes the idea through survival of fittest and these deltas and sound bites, an idea of an ultimate race, a superior race. So there are, again, homoplacy, morality, civilization, intellect, language. These are some of the most and there are more, but these are just a few unexplainable aspects that evolution can't explain, right? And inshallah, hopefully we can talk about them, or you learn more in detail from others, inshallah. But if anybody wants to look at them, you can maybe note them down, and hopefully what I'll try to do is, if Brother Naqib or Brother Saad can remind me later on to share this, I can definitely share the slides for your convenience. And these, a few aspects are not, these are not Muslim arguments. These are arguments by scientists who are saying that there's so many different aspects of our creation, of our existence, that cannot be explained through science. Okay, moving on. Now, when you talk about Darwin, who is this individual? Who is Darwin? Darwin, if you look at if you've read his works and things like that, he is actually an honest, hardworking scientist. He propagated and taught his learnings in a completely different from how it's being taught today. He taught it with the understanding of the philosophy of science. He knew the limitations of his observations. He knew the possible problems that his observations had. So he understood the philosophy of science. In his book, he speaks about the potential problems that his theory will run into. And then he also talks about gradualism, which again is an aspect within Darwinism that is problematic. If it's proven, then it would be problematic. And again, it has been challenged by other scientists. So the conclusion is this, brothers and sisters. In terms of the origin of man, as Muslims, we believe our lineage is from Adam, and that Adam alayhi salam is created by Allah. We believe we do not share common ancestors with other biological life. We do not share common ancestors with other biological life. We believe that Adam was created divinely by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, خَلَقْتَهُ بِيَدَيْهِ, that I've created him with my hands, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In terms of other biological life, the Quran is silent, meaning in terms of us coming from other biological life, or where they came in terms of other biological life and where they came from, the Quran remains silent with regards to that. Darwin's theory of evolution is a valid scientific theory. It does not beg the question of belief, but rather it's a workable scientific theory that helps in explaining different aspects of life, origin of life in this world. The problem is when people conflate between science and truth. The goal of science is not to discover truth. Truth is divine. You've never seen, if somebody says, how does truth look like? You don't know what truth looks like, right? Belief and a valid theory are very different. So you can believe in Allah, we can believe in the Quran, and at the same time we can say that yes, Darwin's theory of evolution is a valid theory, right? It's a valid theory, but it's not a question of creed. The reality is, trying to figure out the exact history of life on Earth is like having only 10 pages from a 500-page book, and you are trying to figure out and conclude with certainty the entire book. And when we take science and jump on the bandwagon and try to explain the unexplainable, and what we're left with is 10 pages of a 500-page book, and we are trying to draw certainty from that. And another fact is that 99% of all biological life has not been observed and studied, right? So there's so much that's beyond us. So I will stop here. I know there was quite a lot.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions. In fact, the questions are honestly a lot. I was talking to Brother Saad, and I think that what we're going to do is save these questions and figure out a way to bring this back and answer it in like a more thorough time frame, because we're a little bit past time. Brother Saad, what do you think?
I think let's answer all the questions because some people might forget.
Okay, I mean, Imam, if you can flip to the group chat, there's a specific question that you wanted to answer. We have a question that doesn't the Quran actually talk about the process of evolving from a single point, then smoke, then stars and planets? Quran says life all comes from water. So perhaps human beings were created in stages. Another person asked the question, what's the difference between a deist and an agnostic? One person says, what about the position of belief in evolution, however guided by the creator and not random? Then insan is brought into the picture later on created directly from Allah, so insan would not fall into the greater tree of evolution. So basically, there's a lot here.
What was the first question you mentioned?
The first question here is, let's see. Doesn't the Quran actually talk about the process of evolving from a single point, then smoke, stars, and planets? Basically, everything comes from water. Everything was created from water.
Okay, so there's a verse in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that they were joint and then we, split them asunder. Now, some may have gone and said, some actually say that that's the theory of the Big Bang, rather, right? And in some ways that's okay to say. I would argue, and scholars that have in-depth knowledge of this field, what they will say is that it's not correct to say that the Quran is a scientific book. Why? The Quran talks about aspects of the natural world that modern science can come to testify to, right? Modern science can testify to, but we won't make science the premise of the truth of the Quran. The reason is, imagine we agree with something and then we say, well, this is what the Quran talks about. And in the future, that very thing is challenged. Now, as Muslims, wouldn't it be that by default, you'd have to consider the Quran false? That's why the Quran is not a standard for anything. The Quran doesn't have a standard for the Quran is the standard, right? There's nothing else that it becomes the standard for the Quran. So science is not the standard for the Quran, rather the Quran is the standard for science. If something can be understood in a certain way, it's okay to understand it, but scholars would advise that we don't necessarily say that that is what the Quran is talking about. Why? Because again, science can change, right? So for example, though we may say, well, that's what it is. The Quran talks about there was a single point, we split it asunder, so that means that's the Big Bang. Well, the Big Bang has more than 17, 18 different workable models. Which one? Right? There's 17 different workable models, and some there are similarities, others there are complete differences. So then which one? So again, the science can complement the Quran. However, we won't base science as the premise of the truthfulness or the divineness of the Quran itself. What was the second question, Brother Naqib?
The second question was, what is the difference between deism and agnosticism?
What is the difference between deism and agnosticism?
Yeah, deism.
So deism, again, deism, from my understanding, there is similarity between the both deism and agnosticism. I would say at this point, agnosticism. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. We may have lost him. So I think we lost Imam Abdullah's connection, probably dropped. We'll see if he comes back on, and then after this question, we'll try to wrap it up, inshallah. Oh, there we go. He's back on.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, inshallah.
Yeah, so I would definitely say that there's similarity between both. Sorry, my computer is going in and out. Yes, so I would definitely say there's similarity between deism and agnosticism. With the finer differences, I would have to look at it and get back to you. But I think maybe somebody maybe can look into it with finer details and then provide that information. But from my understanding, deism and agnosticism have very similar premises, in the sense that where it's, we believe that there is a divine, we believe that there is a God. With regards to, extra and more than that, we're not sure. With agnosticism, it's, the fact that if you are able to prove to them that there is a God that exists through proof, they would accept, right? But maybe a more detailed, if anybody else knows, maybe you can share, inshallah.
Inshallah. With that, I think we're just going to wrap it up. I know we have a few more questions, but we do want to respect your time, and we have allotted an hour for this. So may Allah bless you, Imam Abdullah. We really appreciate the instruction that you gave us today. And for everyone who was able to view any portion of it, it will be uploaded onto YouTube, so you guys can revisit the lecture, inshallah. And we just want to go ahead and end. Imam Abdullah, if you can just end with a dua, and then we'll go ahead and close from there.
جزاكم الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه والتابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وأنت خير الراحمين. Allah, we ask you to accept this from us. Allah, we ask you to make this a means of strengthening our faith. Anything that was beneficial, let it take root in our heart. Let it refine our faith. Let it become a means of strength for our faith. Allah, enable us to practice our deen, understand our deen, to propagate our deen in manners and ways that we will earn your pleasure, and we'll earn your rida, and that you will be pleased with us in this dunya and in the hereafter, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Allah, we ask you to bring peace and tranquility within our hearts. Allah, we ask you to bring peace and tranquility within the spiritual storms that take over us at times. We ask you to give us clear understanding of the Quran, clear understanding of the Sunnah. We ask you to bless us with the nur of knowledge, with the light and illumination of knowledge. Let our minds and our hearts be illuminated with the light of the Quran, with the light of the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah, we ask you to bless us, our families, our loved ones, our institutions, the Ummah at large. Allah, bring peace and tranquility to this country. Allah, guide those you have given them power. Allah, guide their hearts to that which will benefit the nation, will benefit the people, Ya Rabbil Alamin. We seek protection as a people, as a nation, from corruption, from evil, from wretchedness, from haram, from that which will earn your wrath, Ya Rabbil Alameen. اللهم اهدنا واهدي بنا واجعلنا سببا لمن اهتدى يا رب العالمين. يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث أصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا إلى أنفسنا طرفة عين وقل من ذلك. اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. آمين يا رب العالمين. والفاتحة.
On behalf of the White Islam, Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah, we'll see you guys next week for the next hour session. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.